Hello, everyone. Yesterday was the primary election in 5 U.S. states. The biggest highlight is whether a Muslim can win the Democratic nomination for senator in Michigan. So, what happened in yesterday's election? I'll hold off on that for now and tell you later. Just a quick note, today's Good Morning America is a bit special. Thang Nguyen is in Virginia, currently at the final stop of the founding journey, so I can't host the show from the studio. I hope the audio still brings you the same important and useful information. All right, let's first talk about the seriousness of this issue, or rather the seriousness of this election battle. That is the Democratic Senate race in Michigan. Why am I spending most of my time talking about it? The DSA, also known as the Socialist Party of America, well, they call themselves Democratic Socialists, but I'll simplify it. In the most direct terms, the DSA is the Socialist Party of America. We can drop the Democratic part. They're currently expanding their territory within the Democratic Party, winning victory after victory. After the November midterms, they're likely to win mayoralties in at least 5 U.S. cities, including New York, Boston, Seattle, Chicago, and Los Angeles, plus 10 seats in the House of Representatives. In New York City alone, they've secured 4 House seats. But these are what you'd call battles for a single city or district, because so far, the Democratic Socialist Party, or the Socialist Party, hasn't won a single Senate seat. What does this mean? It means that the Socialist Party still can't win a whole state. Unlike the House, where 1 representative is elected for every 800,000 people, for the Senate, you need to win a majority in the state. It's a statewide general election, right? So how do you win a House seat? With an average of 800,000 people, it's basically 400,000 voters at most. So if you get 200,000 votes, you win. So if your support density in that district reaches 200,000 votes, you can win a House seat. So the threshold isn't that high. And the mayor of New York City, the largest in the U.S., Mamdani, only won 430,000 votes back then. The rest were obtained through that strange counting method called ranked choice voting. In other words, he only got those votes by counting the voters' second, third, and fourth choices. You know, to be honest, many citizens aren't even sure who they're picking when they vote. Their impressions are very vague. They don't know them. So how could they accurately fill in a second, third, and fourth candidate? So there are many variables here, or rather many areas that can be manipulated. Of course, no one knows the specifics. But the result was that he only got 430,000 first-choice votes. This Mamdani, as a result, became the mayor of New York City, a city of 8.5 million people. So, in other words, the DSA can get a support density of 200 to 400,000 votes in a single city or district. They can take a city or a district, but they can't take a state. This is the DSA's direction of attack. They want to take a state now. This highlights the significance of last night's Democratic primary in Michigan. It's a very important test. It's testing whether the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, can take over an entire state, or rather if the Democratic Party can withstand the DSA's offensive at the state level. Because the current incumbent Democratic Senator from Michigan, Gary Peters, he's grown tired of the endless campaigning and fundraising that comes with being a senator. He's actually a very important leader. He served as the chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. He was in a leadership position responsible for, raising funds and recruiting new talent. But Peters, he just didn't like that kind of work or that lifestyle. He hated having to constantly ask people for money, so he just said, "I'm done." So in January last year, he suddenly announced that he wouldn't be seeking re-election. Now, the position of a U.S. Senator is very prestigious, and it carries a lot of influence. And generally, there's a very strong incumbency advantage, what we call the incumbent advantage in English, which means that unless something goes terribly wrong, they can usually get reelected. So he had a clear path to re-election as a senator, but he chose not to run. Doesn't that seem a bit strange? Actually, it's not strange at all. It's a very typical American trait. They only do the work they actually enjoy, rather than what their parents, teachers, or bosses expect them to do. Americans also don't necessarily view being a senator as some grand position or the ultimate mark of success in life. Peters felt that at 66 years old, after 18 years in the Senate, he didn't want to spend his whole life doing something he might not even like that much anymore. So he chose to step down while he was still ahead and pursue what he truly loves doing. You see, that's a very American trait, or a classic example of one. That's just how it is in America. For someone from a free country, acting this way is perfectly normal and very natural. And honestly, it's great for his mental health and even his future career development. We all know that when someone pursues their passion, when they follow their heart, they're much more likely to achieve something miraculous. So, by leaving the Senate, Peters might just find a second wind in his career. You never know. But regardless, for the country as a whole, and for American innovation, which, as we know, is second to none, innovation comes from free thought, free space, and the freedom to choose. That's why America's innovative strength is unmatched globally. It's all because of American freedom. That's my take on it. I'm going off on a tangent here, but one of the main goals of this show is to help you understand America, its people, and its cultural systems so you can use it as a reference. Anyway, Peters' sudden resignation has sent shockwaves through 3 different groups. Who's the first group? The first group is the Democratic mainstream because the Senate is currently split 50-50. To be precise, it's 47 Democrats to 53 Republicans. In 2026, if the Democrats want to take back the Senate, they have to gain seats, not lose them. They can't afford to lose a single one, so they absolutely must hold on to this seat in Michigan. Okay, so the second group to be stirred up is the Republican Party. Because the Republicans thought, wow, Michigan is a swing state. We have a chance here. But because Peters had the incumbency advantage, we couldn't unseat him. Now that he's out, why wouldn't we jump in? So the Republicans put forward a heavyweight former representative and former House Intelligence Committee chairman, Mike Rogers, to run. Trump also personally endorsed him. The hope is to go from defense to offense, not just holding their own seats, but also seizing this seat the Democrats suddenly vacated, helping them maintain their Senate majority. That is to say, this Senate race in Michigan is a must-win for the Democrats. They simply can't afford to lose it. But then a third group emerged, the Democratic Socialists of America, or the DSA. They saw this as their first opening at the state level. They finally found an opportunity, a golden chance to break through and win their first state-level public office. And they found a perfect candidate, a man named El Sayed. He's a Muslim, an Egyptian American. His parents immigrated from Egypt, and he was born in the U.S. His resume is just perfect. He has a bachelor's from the University of Michigan, a doctorate in public health from Oxford, and a medical degree from Columbia. In his medical career, he served as the health director for the city of Detroit and Wayne County. So he's like a Michigan version of Mamdani. He has a great image, he's well-spoken, and has an impressive background. Plus, he's a socialist who's now found a sudden golden opportunity to make a breakthrough at the state level. So the DSA is going all in, and his candidacy has turned into a civil war within the Democratic Party. The Democrats' own candidate is Heidi Stevens, Stevens, who's a current representative. Chuck Schumer and other mainstream Democrats are backing her. Meanwhile, El Sayed has rallied support from the DSA and progressives like Bernie Sanders and AOC. To block El Sayed, the Democratic establishment spent $70 million. El Sayed reportedly only spent $10 million. But with the wave of young people in Michigan embracing socialism, he has incredible momentum. The Democratic Party is essentially putting up a desperate fight. As for last night's election, let me tell you what the results were. The result is, well, there is no result yet. So far, no official result has been released because the vote is so close. But currently, it's reported that 95% of the votes have been counted, and El Sayed is leading Stevens 48.6% to 47.4%. So the lead is about 1 to 2 percentage points, roughly 20,000 votes. But with only 5% of the votes left to count, it'll be hard to turn things around. It's very likely that El Sayed will win the primary, and that would be a massive political earthquake. Then in November, he'll face off against Rogers if he wins. And if he beats Rogers, it would be a historic breakthrough for the Democratic Socialists at the state level. All right, I'd like to talk about what we call the macro trends here, what major trends we're seeing in America through this election. First, I want to discuss why the Democrats can't resist the Socialist Party, why they can't just push them out. Now, before we get into that, let's take a quick break and share some real feedback from one of our listeners. A viewer left a message saying they injured their foot and are recovering. They've been eating this Red Sea cucumber from Jeju Island, South Korea, every day and feel it's been very helpful for pain and healing. So they reached out to say thank you for the recommendation. The reason this Red Sea cucumber gets so much attention isn't just its nutrients, but its incredible regenerative ability. If you cut this sea cucumber, it can completely grow back in just a few months, fully restored. It contains small molecule collagen peptides and saponins, providing nutritional support for daily repair and maintenance. It's great for seniors or anyone in recovery, so hey, definitely check it out. Of course, everyone's body's different, so results will vary. We can't guarantee the same experience for everyone, but we've received a lot of great feedback, including my own. And so that's why I'm happy to recommend this product to all of you. Alright, if you're interested, click below the video for details. Use the Fangwei promo code for 15% off. For long-term needs, try the monthly plan. Starting the second month, you can get up to 20% off. You can pause or cancel anytime, so there's no pressure. Okay, let's get back to today's news. Continuing on, why the Democrats can't resist the DSA. It's simple. Right now, they're neck and neck with the GOP. If they start an open civil war with the DSA, they feel they'll definitely lose. But without that fight, the DSA will keep using young voters to chip away at them. They'll lose more and more ground, and in the end, they still lose. So the Democrats are currently, as they say in English, between a rock and a hard place. There's no easy way out. They're stuck. That is the current dilemma for the Democratic Party. But interestingly, 10 years ago, the Republicans were in almost the exact same situation, the exact same dilemma. You remember back then, Trump stepped up with incredible momentum, taking over the GOP's territory and their votes. The GOP wanted to kick Trump out, but Trump said, if you kick me out, I'll just run as an independent. The GOP realized that if Trump ran alone, he'd split the vote, and that would mean certain defeat in 2016. So they had to endure it. As a result, Trump kept pushing forward. Except for the first state, Iowa, where he was second, he won every other state and secured the nomination. As the saying goes, times change. 10 years later, the Democrats seem to be repeating the Republicans' dilemma. However, the similarity is only skin deep. The nature and outcome of these two situations will be vastly different. How so? Let's first look at the fundamental differences. Let's talk about the core of it. We all know Obama won the presidency in 2008. His campaign slogan was just one word: change. So maybe Obama was dissatisfied with some specific things in America, and that's why he called for this change. But we have to ask a question. After all, for over 200 years, America has been the strongest and most successful country in the world. In America, there's a saying, whatever works, don't change it. If it's running well, why would you want to change it? Right? So what do you want to change? Are you just changing small things you're unhappy with, or are you making major changes? We know today that Obama wanted major changes, but he was quite cautious. He didn't challenge the traditional Democratic mainstream. He changed things quietly as a mainstream figure. But in many ways, he deviated significantly from American tradition. For example, universal health care, America never did that. Large-scale government spending and welfare, including subsidies for businesses and pushing green energy, and especially regarding American ethnic groups, the racial divide. Since the 1960s, after the Civil Rights Act, the racial divide was healing to the point where even a black man could become president. But once this black man became president, one effect he had was actually pushing a racial divide. But after all, he didn't openly campaign under the banner of socialism. Well, of course, some say he was actually deeply influenced by socialism in his heart. It just wasn't obvious. Anyway, when Obama was elected in 2008 with the slogan, change, it actually caught America off guard. Or rather, it caught traditional America off guard. And then the second step was Trump in 2016. Trump, in my view, was a response to Obama's change. Trump was actually just a private citizen. He'd never even been a city councilman, and suddenly he's running for president. The reason was he couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand seeing America becoming unrecognizable. He's a commoner himself, and he won the votes of common Americans. To be honest, in 2016, Trump didn't win on party lines or ideology because back then, the Christian voters in the Republican Party didn't really know him. He was just a businessman from Manhattan, New York. Like, who are you? Where'd you come from? Who knows what you're about? He actually won by speaking for the ordinary American people, winning the votes of blue-collar workers in the Midwest. And you have to realize these were traditionally Democratic votes, even what you'd call the Democrats' base. But because they no longer resonated with the Democratic Party, and Trump's words did, that became the key to Trump's victory in 2016. And that election, that victory, it caught the Democratic Party completely off guard. So Trump caught the Democrats off guard, and his policy was to prioritize American tradition, or what you'd call traditional America. So during his first term, including the overturning of Roe v. Wade, his tax cuts, deregulation, and so on, it was all a return to traditional American economic policy. Okay, and then we come to the 2020 election. The 2020 election, in my view, was a carefully planned counteroffensive by the Democrats. And in that process, they allied with the Republican establishment, basically launching a total ambush against Trump, catching him completely off guard. So this was a real surprise, causing him to lose the White House when he completely didn't expect it. Then, after Biden took office, he continued Obama's path, continuing his way of changing America, including globalization, green energy, LGBT, and transgender rights, pushing them to an unprecedented strength. These are all paths that completely depart from traditional America. But even so, Biden didn't fly the socialist banner. But under the Biden administration, the influence of socialist ideas within the Democratic Party has increased significantly. Actually, his vice president, Kamala Harris, although she's not DSA, her thinking is basically a socialist mindset. It's just that the banner hasn't been shown, but the policies have all come out and shown it. Okay, then coming to the 2024 election, this time it's the Republican Party's formal major counteroffensive. So this time, there are no more ambushes for either side. Both sides are mentally fully prepared. This is a head-on confrontation. So the 2024 presidential election is a positional war for both sides, a frontal assault. Then, after returning to the White House, this is Trump 2.0, a full and strong return to tradition. And then moving to the 2026 election, which is the midterm election, this time it's the Democratic Party's counteroffensive. We'll see if the Democrats can make it. But this time, a side force has appeared in the Democratic Party, which is the rise of the DSA. The DSA has surfaced, the socialists have surfaced, wanting to seize leadership of the Democratic Party and eventually win America again. So originally, we said that before 2008, it was the Republican Party versus the Democratic Party, but now it has essentially become a showdown between Trump and the DSA. It has evolved into this. Essentially, it's a struggle between traditional America and socialist America. That's the fundamental difference. On the surface, it's the Republican Party facing the challenge of Trump and the Democratic Party facing the challenge of the DSA, but essentially it's a competition or struggle between traditional America and socialist America. Okay, so if the essence is different, the results will also be different. So in 2016, the Republican Party basically swallowed a bitter pill. They tolerated Trump, but in the end, he gave the Republican Party a big surprise. This surprise was a pleasant surprise because Trump actually defeated Clinton, bringing a surprise to the Republican Party. To this day, MAGA has replaced the establishment and become the new Republican mainstream. The Republican Party has been rebuilt. Of course, the original establishment within the Republican Party is unhappy, but most Republicans are still very happy. Because especially those Republicans who support traditional America are very happy. And on the Democratic side, although the DSA is in full swing in 2026, I think they won't become the new mainstream of the Democratic Party. They might break the Democratic Party or split it, but they can't completely become the mainstream of the Democratic Party. Why? Why? What do you think that is? Because I think America, although the American people are not that clear-headed about communism and socialism, and American youth can even be said to be very confused, but this country has not yet fallen to the point of embracing socialism. Okay, then, well, that was our previous topic. Next, I'll quickly talk about this DSA, this big shot Mamdani socialist experiment in New York, which has been a very hot topic lately. So let's discuss it. DSA, this big shot Mamdani, he has a campaign slogan, or an ideal, I guess. He says, I want to provide New Yorkers with affordable grocery stores. He says New York is the second most expensive city in the U.S., and food is especially pricey. He says his slogan is that in the wealthiest city of the wealthiest country in the world, no one should worry about whether they can afford to feed their family. Well, his method is to have the city government fund the opening of nonprofit grocery stores. Many of us from mainland China call them supply and marketing cooperatives. So in each borough, New York's 5 boroughs, 1 in each, 5 across the city, as mayor, his goal is to open the first one in the Bronx by the end of 2027, with the others opening gradually during his 4-year term. So, what will they sell? Meat, vegetables, bread, milk, and other basic foods, and the prices would be 30% cheaper than the market rate. Now, why can they be cheaper? I'll get to that in a bit. The city government even issued a request for proposals to find experienced what they call grocery store operators to run them. Because the city says, hey, we don't know the grocery business. That's actually good, quite humble of them. Now, all of this sounds very wonderful, doesn't it? But will it work? Do you all think it will work? Why don't you all leave a comment and let me know? Well, Feng Wei is here, and I'll give you my prediction. I'll tell you what's going to happen next. First of all, these city-run cooperatives don't seek profit and give back to the people. It sounds really good, like a non-profit organization, but the problem is whether it can succeed. We all know that in the U.S., the grocery retail industry is incredibly competitive. Not only can small corner stores not survive, but supermarkets and even big box stores like Walmart and Costco all sell groceries. Doing retail in the U.S. is tough. It's hard to turn a profit. You have to exhaust every effort just to survive. So what does making money really involve? There are only 2 ways to make money, right? Increase revenue or decrease costs. And costs have already been squeezed to the absolute minimum. So the price of groceries is the result of many companies competing in a saturated market. You could say it's already as cheap as it can get. So your city-run cooperative, how can you be even cheaper? What makes you think you can be cheaper than these supermarkets? Well, Mamdani has an answer for that. He says, why are we cheaper? Because we save on costs. Our stores don't pay rent or property taxes. We give them special status. We don't seek profit either, selling at near wholesale prices and passing the savings to customers, so we can be 30% cheaper. Now, will this assumption work? Does it make sense? Let me first address this point. So, you don't pay rent or property taxes. Well, first of all, that means the city loses the rent and property taxes it could have collected. So for the city's finances, this is just robbing Peter to pay Paul. Let's not even mention that. Suppose because of the city government's unique nature, you really could save that money and keep prices 30% lower. Then, if you're truly 30% cheaper than the prices from saturated market competition, what would happen? Everyone would come flocking in, wouldn't they? They'd buy out all your stock, right? Once it's sold out, will you restock? How will you restock? Will you use a rationing system? Rationing would definitely be politically incorrect, right? So you'd have to restock like crazy until everything is fully available. And then people would just keep on flocking in, right? When the volume reaches a certain point, it'll exceed the money you saved from not paying rent or property taxes, right? At that point, you'll start seeing real losses. And that's not even mentioning people reselling for profit, right? If you're 30% cheaper, people will buy it and flip it on the street or in other stores, accelerating your losses, right? So as you operate, as long as you're 30% cheaper, you'll lose more and more. How can you afford that? Where does the money for these supply and marketing co-ops come from? From government tax revenue, of course, right? You'll end up with a fiscal black hole that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. What then? You'll have to raise taxes. But New Yorkers will never let you raise taxes, so you'll end up with a fiscal deficit scandal. Okay, so what other options do you have then? There are only 2 ways, right? One is to keep funding it, ignoring the fiscal deficit. New York was already in deficit when Marcantonio took over. To run these co-ops, and not just one, but 5, plus daycares, each one becomes a hole, and the city's deficit will skyrocket. So what can be done? So this path isn't really a path at all, right? Because New York City residents won't easily let them raise taxes. Okay, the second path is limited supply, which is a method called rationing. This takes us right back to the supply and marketing co-ops of Cultural Revolution era China. The shelves are often empty, with nothing there. If there is something, you need a coupon to buy it. So how would rationing work? What? Is New York going to issue food stamps? Well, yes and no. They won't because it looks too bad, right? But they'd still have to limit it, and that means check an ID. So now it's become a political joke. In the U.S., you don't need ID to vote, but in a New York co-op, you need ID to buy groceries. You need ID just to buy a head of cabbage. The reason you don't require ID for elections is because it prevents poor people from voting, since poor people and black people might not have ID or can't afford it. So are you now making it so they can't buy groceries? You were supposed to be helping the poor, but now you're requiring ID and making it so they can't buy food. What now? So it's very ironic. Of course, this is a political clash, highlighting the necessity of voter ID and the absurdity of not requiring it. But getting back to the co-op itself, it would quickly start losing money and the shelves would be empty, right? Don't you all agree? Of course, that's only part of the problem. Also, why would employees at these cooperatives work hard? Why would they? What's in it for them, right? That's a hallmark of government-run entities. Another issue is bribery. Since the shelves are always empty, people might slip some cash to an employee to get goods out the back door. That's where the corruption starts. So I'm not exaggerating here. This is almost bound to happen. You have to remember the core of it. Governments don't produce anything and they don't innovate. They have no money of their own. They just use other people's money to good using public funds for it. And doing good like that leads to 2 things. First, zero efficiency, and second, rampant corruption. Ultimately, it's like Margaret Thatcher said, socialism works until you run out of other people's money. Do you think this is the socialist experiment that New York is facing right now? All right, please leave your comments below, okay? Your opinions are all part of the public discourse. One last thing, for our new viewers, please subscribe to Fangway Time. We'll help you stay on top of the news and the analysis behind it. The reason I'm doing this show is to clearly explain what's happening in America today. If you think what I'm saying makes sense, please share this with more of your friends. I believe these insights and the painful lessons we've learned in China through blood and tears need to be shared with Americans and the world as soon as possible. Don't you agree? All right, please share this video. Thank you all. Okay, see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.